the most part, in zombie movies, the deaths are either unexpected or uneventful. Oh, look, another guy got dragged under into a horde of zombies. Groundbreaking. Occasionally, however, we actually get a bit more than just some gore out of a character death, when in the moments before their demise, they realise they're gonna bite the big one, and they decide to put on a bit of a show for us. So, I'm Amy from What Culture, and here are the 10 best I'm Dead and I Know It moments in zombie movie history. 10. Linda, Evil Dead 2. In some ways, by the time Ash has Linda's head trapped in a vice with her body on the floor being sliced down the middle, she's already kind of dead. However, her second death might actually be more interesting than her first, because when possessed Linda realises that she's at Ash's mercy, she tries a clever little tactic. The ranting, possessed versions of the characters are all impossible to feel bad about killing because they're so evidently evil and bloodthirsty and generally gross. You know, and by the time you're just a severed head, it's quite difficult to scare anyone into submission, because I mean, what are you gonna do? Give them a hard stare? On realising that her death is probably imminent, Linda reverts back to a presentation of her previous innocent self, crying and howling in front of a very distressed-looking Ash. She tells him over and over again that she loves him, with tears in her eyes and her face looking the most human it has in a while. It's quite a cool moment because it's fun to see monsters try and work their way out of things, especially when we're used to zombies being kind of brainless lumps. And for all her effort, she gets a chainsaw to the skull, so sorry, dead Linda. You tried to be clever, but it's just not gonna cut it. 9. James Shade, Resident Evil. Though not at the hands of zombies, James Shade's moment of realisation sticks out as a particularly unfortunate one. After finding himself trapped in a hallway with his team of commandos, the group are put to task by a series of lasers. These lasers slice through anything they touch, zooming down the hallway in progressively harder to avoid formations that make quick work of his team. Shade puts up one impressive display of quick thinking, strength and acrobatics, managing to avoid all the lasers that effortlessly dispatch of his colleagues before he encounters one final trump card from the Red Queen. What first appears as a manageable display of just one waist-height laser line quickly morphs into a grid of lasers swallowing the whole space of the hallway, completely impossible to jump around, under or through. Shade's face switches from a panicked determination to a bitter acceptance as he stays frozen on the spot. His lip twitches and he grits his teeth, seemingly accepting his inevitable fate with understandable rage. He doesn't even flinch as the lasers slice him into chunks, looking the killer rays dead on as they cut through his eyeballs. So I guess as far as deaths go, you still have to think that's pretty badass. 8. Ed, Shaun of the Dead. Sure, there's heroic deaths aplenty throughout the zombie horror subgenre, but none of them are quite like Ed and Shaun's tearful goodbye in Edgar Wright's 2004 rom-com extraordinaire. In the basement of the local pub, Shaun sits hopelessly with his girlfriend Liz and bitten best friend Ed. After briefly discussing how they might all commit suicide with only 2 shotgun shells, they realise they aren't trapped after all, and they can use the keg lift to get out onto the street and to freedom. Shaun promptly goes to help Ed onto the lift so that all 3 of them can escape together, to which a heavily bleeding Ed responds that he might just stay because he'd only slow them down. With his charming signature humour, Ed makes Shaun laugh one last time before sending him away, watching Shaun and Liz rise up to the street, confessing their love for him as he just shakes it off, waiting for the zombies above to break through the cellar door and rip him to shreds. It's a true class act from a well-loved character, made even better by the fact that in the end we see that even after death he's still partially himself. The zombies never got to rip him apart. Instead, his zombified body is chained up in Shaun's shed playing video games forever. 7. Andy, Cargo. In the scale of the journey, father and husband Andy realises quite early on that he's gonna die, but he's also one of those rare characters who gets to know he's gonna die a long time before it happens. So lucky him, I guess. After veering off the road, Andy sees that the resulting car crash has mortally injured his wife. She has a whole tree branch stuck through her stomach, and soon enough she dies and goes rabid. So when Andy tries to reach into the back of the car to protect their baby, his wife takes a nice big chomp on his meaty upper arm. Andy does manage to get their baby out of the car, utter some reassuring words and promise to be back in a second before going and sitting against a car and letting out a heart-wrenching scream. In that moment he expresses all his anger and sadness and frustration at the situation, and processes the knowledge that at some point he's going to suffer the same deathly fate as his wife, and And who's going to take care of the baby when that happens? As a parent, it must be one of the absolute worst things to not know how your baby is going to be kept safe after you're gone. And surely that anguish is multiplied tenfold when it's the zombie apocalypse. God, it's no wonder that screams so terrible. 6. Frank. 28 days later. Danny Boyle's iconic zombie flick is a masterpiece in a lot of ways, and one of its many strengths is its great characters. Taxi driver Frank takes in protagonist Jim and fellow survivor Selena, inviting them with him and his daughter to head to a supposed safe zone in Manchester. The group arrive at the military blockade that was meant to be their salvation, only to find it abandoned, and whilst looking around, a drop of blood from one of the infected dead falls into Frank's eye, infecting him too. As he realizes that he's imminently going to become one of the rage-fueled zombie-like figures that have just rampaged through the UK, he apologizes to his daughter for losing his temper with her earlier and tells her that he loves her very much, making his amends before his inevitable death. Obviously confused, his daughter begins to approach him, only for him to demand that she keeps away and then forcefully push her back. His last wish and first priority is to ensure that he doesn't hurt the person he loves most, and he tries to put as much space between him and the group as physically possible before the rage takes him over. Not only was he a quick-thinking guy, but he was also an absolute gent. 5. Roger. Dawn of the Dead. With such a small central cast consisting of just 4 main characters, it was always going to be emotional when one of them bit the dust. Roger delivers on this promise of a sad demise when, towards the ending of the film, he processes his slow march towards death after being bitten whilst clearing out zombies. Roger and his fellow ex-SWAT friend Peter are fast favourites in the movie, breaking away from their unethical colleagues and establishing themselves as badass and moral characters. When Roger finds himself getting sicker and sicker from his bites, he makes Peter promise to kill him if he turns. He knows he's going to die, but what makes his little talk with Peter more emotional is that he seems convinced there's some way he can make sure he doesn't turn, insisting that he'll try not to let himself become one of the living dead as if that was ever an option. This makes it all the more upsetting when he eventually emerges as a sentient corpse from beneath the sheets and stares Peter dead in the eyes as his friend is forced to kill him, all whilst a TV broadcast is playing in the background where some frustrated presenters talk about remaining logical and how humans never can because they're just that, human. It just reminds us how naive and silly Roger's hope of having a choice was. 4. Teddy McGiggles. Little Monsters. Josh Gad did an absolutely incredible job with this role, meaning that when his character, Teddy McGiggles, finally meets his hideous death, we were both satisfied and a little bit heartbroken. He is a terrible, terrible person, like a really horrible guy, who at one point was fully willing to let a whole class of children be killed by zombies. But that doesn't mean he's not entertaining. And when someone's really entertaining, we kind of hope they'll stick around till the end. Just as he did at the start with the children in the gift shop, Teddy once again refuses to let another survivor into his safe zombie-free zone. This time the zone is his truck, and it's also not as safe as he thinks. He's proper smarmy as he flips off protagonist Dave and locks the van doors to leave him to the dead. Dave begs to be let in, which Teddy ignores until he sees his own sock puppet emerging from between some curtains and then gets brutally attacked by it. Teddy doesn't really get a long time to realise what's happening to him, but if you watch his eyes, you'll see as they widen in almost disbelief. This guy really thought he was invincible, and now he can't quite believe that he's being killed in his own van by his own puppet. I mean, sorry dude, but you definitely had it coming. 3. Sokwu. Train to Busan. Train to Busan follows busy working dad So Sokwu and his young daughter as their trip to Busan is interrupted by the zombie apocalypse. Through all the trials of surviving an infectious outbreak, So manages to keep himself and his daughter safe, right up until he suffers a nasty bite. Still reeling from the battle in which he earned his bite, So leans on the train's railing and wobbles about until his bitten hand catches his eye. He freezes up and his eyes go wide, his mouth hanging open as he looks from his bite to his crying daughter, and in that second he realizes he's not going to be able to protect her for much longer. After showing the only other surviving adult how to drive the train, he goes to bid farewell to his daughter. There he seems to have a second moment of realization, where before he knew he was going to die, now she grabs his sleeves with her tiny little hands and he realizes this also means he's gonna have to leave her. You can almost hear the moment that his heart breaks as he has to pry away his daughter's hand and leave her there. This scene had to get a place on this list just because of the sheer emotive power. If you didn't cry, you just don't have a heart. 2. Live. Dead Snow. Losing consciousness is scary for whatever reason it happens. There's just something really awful about reaching that moment where you can't control your body anymore and you can't stop yourself from falling down. You know what's even scarier than that though? Waking up from being passed out and seeing your own intestines being pulled out by a zombified Nazi. Yeah, you know what? I'd say that actually ranks pretty high on my list of worst things to wake up to. Dead Snow has no shortage of gory deaths, but Liv's final moments are not just bloody but heroic too. On opening her eyes after being knocked unconscious in a zombie ambush, through her blurred vision she can just make out that her body is not in a good way. She looks unwaveringly at the monsters ripping out her innards and realizes there's no way she'll survive this, so she may as well take them out with her. She gets hold of an old stick grenade and decides to detonate that bad boy, and as we switch to the perspective of a friend far away down the mountain, we see the giant eruption take them all out. I mean, hey, I love to blow up a Nazi just as much as the next guy, so to me, she's a real hero. 1. Captain Rhodes. Day of the Dead. Whilst there's a few more noble deaths in this movie, none are quite as satisfying as Rhodes' demise at the hands of a zombie he hated, a zombie by the name of Bub. Bub had previously been picked out as a hope for the future by scientist Dr. Logan, as Bub was a docile zombie with some elements of his humanity preserved. When Rhodes then jeopardized everything and murdered Dr. Logan in the process, he got himself in the bad books of both the living and the dead. Rhodes finds himself cornered by Bub, who, armed with a pistol, gravely injures him. Dragging himself along the hallways and pulling at locked doors, Rhodes seems eager to find some way out of this mess, right up until he calls on the elevator. The elevator doors open to reveal a horde of captive zombies, and he lets out a terrified scream as they all reach towards him. Full of gunshots from Bub and being torn to bits by other zombies, his final bitter words as he realizes there's no way he's gonna survive now are to yell "choke on it" to the zombies dragging away the lower half of his body to feast on in front of him. Honestly, it's a bit of a waste of your last words. I mean, even if they do choke, what's gonna happen? They can't die, they're already dead. But hey, you know, we know Rhodes wasn't a smart man, and this just solidifies it. And actually on that note, we've reached the end of this list of the 10 best I'm Dead and I Know It moments in zombie movie history. If there's any more you would add to this list, then please do let us know in the comments below. And remember to check out whatculture.com for more lists and articles like this every single day. As always, I've been Amy from What Culture, and I'll catch you next time.